The morning mist rolled slowly through the streets of London, weaving itself around the tall chimneys and wrought iron railings, as though the city were still half asleep. The sky was a pale, watery grey, hinting at the promise of sun, though in Victorian England, the clouds often lingered like gentle old companions. The distant chime of Big Ben echoed softly across the rooftops, its low tones muffled by the fog. Horse hooves clicked on cobblestone streets, steady and rhythmic, as early carriages creaked past sleepy storefronts. The windows of bakeries glowed faintly golden from within, and the smell of warm bread drifted out into the cool air. Street lamps still flickered faintly in the haze, their gas flames casting halos of orange light that wavered in the fog. A chimney sweep in dark, soot-covered clothes trudged past, brushing dust from his sleeves as he whistled a tune, his boots leaving damp prints on the stone. On the corner of a quiet square, a paperboy yawned and called out the headlines in a tired voice, the latest edition of the Times folded neatly under his arm. A stray dog sniffed about near his feet, tail wagging gently. A woman in a shawl passed by, clutching a basket of fresh eggs and a bunch of lavender wrapped in paper, her face half hidden beneath her bonnet. The buildings loomed tall and close together, their brick facades blackened with the memory of coal fires. Curtains stirred in upstairs windows as households began to stir, the first fire of the day kindling in a hearth, the hiss of a kettle rising like a whisper from within. Inside one such home, in the heart of Bloomsbury, the air was still drowsy with sleep. A maid lit the fireplace in the drawing-room, her movements precise and practiced. The room slowly filled with warmth, and the soft crackle of the flame mixed with the distant sound of carriage wheels and church bells. In the kitchen below, a cook began preparing the morning meal. The aroma of bacon and tea leaves began to drift upward through the floorboards. Buttered crumpets sizzled on a cast-iron griddle. A brass clock ticked steadily on the wall, its rhythm like a heartbeat to the house. Back outside, London moved slowly, like a great, old clockwork machine just waking from slumber. Flower sellers arranged blooms at their carts, their fingers red from the cold. Carnations, daisies, and roses, bright pops of color against the fog. A policeman on his morning beat nodded to a passing milkman, the latter carefully placing glass bottles outside doorsteps, the cream rising thick at the top. A cat watched from a windowsill, its tail curling around its body as it blinked lazily at the street below. The River Thames, broad and calm, slipped by quietly beneath the bridges, its surface dotted with early barges. The riverbanks were shrouded in mist, and gulls circled slowly overhead, their calls faint against the hush of the city. Further along the embankment, a poet in a long wool coat paused at a bench, notebook in hand. He scribbled a few lines with a fountain pen, his breath visible in the chill air, the ink slightly smudged by the damp. Behind him, the silhouettes of Parliament and Westminster Abbey stood grand and solemn in the distance. A small group of children passed by, bundled in scarves and mittens, chattering about their lessons and games. A governess followed closely, gently guiding them past puddles and horse droppings with a practiced eye. As the fog began to lift ever so slightly, the outline of the city sharpened. Shops opened their shutters. Carts delivered firewood. A newsboy ran down the street, scarf flying behind him like a flag. A gentleman paused to polish the brass handle of his door. The city hummed with quiet energy, not hurried, not loud, but full of life, of routine, of small comforts. Everything moved with purpose, yet without urgency, as if the whole of London understood the value of stillness before the day truly began. A piano played softly from an open window, its melody drifting gently down into the street. A young girl practiced her scales, the notes rising and falling like the fog itself, gentle, slow, and graceful. The lamplighters returned to extinguish the gas lamps, long poles in hand, tipping each glass bulb until the flame blinked out. One by one, the streetlights faded, replaced by the slow-growing light of day. By mid-morning, the fog had thinned, leaving behind droplets on wrought iron fences and windowpanes. The smell of chimney smoke lingered sweetly in the air, mixed with the sharp scent of coal and damp earth. The city was now fully awake, though still wrapped in that peculiar calm that only Victorian mornings could conjure. A kind of poetic stillness, where time moved just a bit slower, where people greeted the day with quiet ritual and practiced grace. As the day deepens in Victorian London, the cobblestone streets begin to echo with life. Each stone, uneven and worn smooth by decades of boots and wheels, holds the memory of footsteps past. Their gentle clack beneath carriage wheels forms a soft, rhythmic music, a lullaby sung by the city itself. The streets wind and curve with charming unpredictability, meandering between rows of tall, narrow buildings with ornate facades and cast-iron balconies. Some bear signs in gilt lettering, a tailor here, a bookbinder there, each a small story in the fabric of the neighborhood. The clatter of hooves mingles with the rustling of skirts and the shuffle of polished shoes. Gentlemen tip their hats to ladies as they pass, and flower sellers call out the day's offerings in sing-song voices, their hands wrapped in woolen gloves. Children dash between puddles, laughing as their boots splash water onto the seams of their knickerbockers. A boy in suspenders pushes a cart of coal, his cheeks red with effort, while across the street, a barber leans in his doorway, wiping his hands on a crisp white towel, watching the world stroll by. The pace is slow, deliberate. No one is in a rush. The afternoon stretches lazily, and the city seems content to let it linger. Gaslights begin to flicker on even before the sun has set. One by one, across the city, lamplighters in brown coats and stovepipe hats extend their long poles, lighting each lamp with the same care they've practiced for years. The flames bloom gently, housed in delicate glass, casting golden pools of light across the damp cobblestones. The glow is soft, amber-toned, and comforting. It illuminates the curves of the street, glints off carriage handles, and reflects in the small puddles left by morning rain. It is the kind of light that softens the world, turning edges round and shadows gentle. The alleyways, too, have their own quiet charm. Narrow and tucked away, they're lined with worn bricks and ivy that climbs toward unseen windows. Here, a cat slinks by with silent grace. There, a boy sits with a tin whistle, playing a lilting tune as a few pennies clink into a cap at his feet. Gaslight gives even the simplest scene a touch of magic. A baker's window steams with warmth, revealing trays of fresh bread and warm scones. A young woman in a shawl stops to gaze at the display, her breath clouding the glass. A man inside, brushing flour from his hands, offers a kind smile and a wave. At the edge of the street, a bookseller lights a lantern of his own. Inside his tiny shop, books lean together like old friends. Some shelves bow beneath the weight of leather-bound volumes and dog-eared journals. The scent of paper, ink, and time fills the air. He runs his fingers along a row of spines, looking for a title he knows a customer would love. Elsewhere, the tinkle of a bell above a door signals the arrival of patrons to a small tea shop. Inside, the tables are draped in lace, and porcelain cups clink gently on saucers. Conversations are quiet, punctuated only by the sound of teaspoons stirring sugar into hot tea. Through the foggy window, passers-by see only soft silhouettes and candlelight. As the sun finally begins to set beyond the rooftops, the city glows not in brilliant light, but in soft, lingering warmth. The gas lamps shimmer like stars scattered along the road, guiding late wanderers and carriage drivers through the night. A constable makes his rounds, his boots steady and his lantern swaying gently in hand. He tips his helmet to a seamstress returning home, her basket filled with folded cloth and spools of thread. The two exchange a few quiet words, their breath rising in white curls before vanishing into the cool air. A fiddler stands at a busy corner, playing a slow and mournful tune. A small crowd forms, leaning in to listen, their faces lit by the glow of the gaslights. The music floats upward, mixing with the scent of chimney smoke and the distant tolling of a church bell. Down another lane, a man closes his bookshop, locking the wooden door with a heavy iron key. He pauses before leaving, taking one last look at the lamplit street, smiling softly at the peace it brings. In a nearby mews, stable hands prepare horses for the night. Leather reins creak, and hooves scuff softly against stone. The horses snort gently, their breath visible in the evening air. Oil lamps hang from beams, casting a soft light over straw-covered floors. And above all this, the windows of London's homes begin to glow from within, the golden flicker of firelight, the shimmer of candelabra, the faint silhouette of a family gathered near the hearth. In this gaslit world, shadows dance and stretch along the cobblestones. Every corner of the street seems touched by memory. Each flicker of flame tells a story. The gentle light hides nothing, but neither does it overwhelm. It reveals the city with kindness, casting even the most ordinary street in a warm, dreamlike hue. As night deepens, the gaslights continue their watchful glow. Steady. Quiet. Timeless. The cobblestone streets, soothed by the passing day, prepare to rest, wrapped in fog, cradled by silence, and kissed by flame. Step through the polished oak door, and the world outside fades to a hush. Inside a Victorian home, time moves gently. Slippers on wooden floors make no sound. The warmth of a coal fire reaches out with invisible arms, wrapping the room in gentle comfort. The scent of beeswax polish, dried lavender, and faint coal smoke rests in the air, subtle but ever present. The front parlor is still and neat, a space kept in quiet readiness for unexpected guests or calm conversation. Heavy velvet drapes frame tall windows, their fabric thick enough to mute the sound of the street. Pale morning light filters through lace shears, drawing faint patterns onto the carpet below, floral spirals stitched in soft hues of burgundy, moss, and rose. A high-backed armchair sits by the hearth, its upholstery faded but loved. On the small side table rests a worn book with a satin bookmark halfway through. A pair of spectacles lies folded beside it. A delicate porcelain teacup, half full and cooled, still waits, its painted roses almost glowing in the amber light of the room. Overhead, a crystal chandelier gleams quietly, each prism catching the light and sending glimmers across the wallpaper, rich with damask vines and faded blossoms. The ceiling is high, adorned with plaster molding in curling, elegant detail, like the petals of a marble flower frozen mid-bloom. Down the hall, the scent of baking lingers near the kitchen door. A maid in a starched apron moves gently, her footsteps practiced and careful. She hums a soft tune as she places dough into a warm oven, the heat casting a golden glow across her cheeks. The dining room stands in quiet dignity, its long mahogany table gleaming from fresh polish. A lace runner stretches down the center, embroidered by hand. Atop it, a vase holds a few garden roses, still dewy from the morning mist. Silverware rests precisely in its place, and the chairs, all identical in their carved backs and velvet cushions, seem to wait politely. The ticking of a grandfather clock breaks the silence, its pendulum swinging steadily behind a pane of glass etched with ivy. Every hour, a chime echoes gently through the halls, not harsh, but deep and mellow, like the house's own heartbeat. In the library, the shelves stretch from floor to ceiling, filled with volumes bound in leather and linen, their spines lined like soldiers at attention. The smell of old paper and pipe tobacco lingers here. A globe sits in the corner, its oceans faded to parchment blue, its continents ringed with fine brass. A lamp with a fringed shade casts a pool of golden light over a nearby writing desk, where a journal lies open and ink dries slowly on its last penned line. The drawing room is softer in tone, gentler colors, finer fabrics. This is where ladies gather to sew or read by the window. A needlepoint hoop rests on a cushioned chair, beside a basket of thread in every shade imaginable. Music sheets are tucked neatly atop the pianoforte, and an ivory metronome stands poised beside them, though it does not tick unless summoned. Up the staircase, which curves with quiet elegance, a runner muffles each step. The banister, worn smooth by years of hands, gleams beneath a coating of beeswax polish. Family portraits hang in even rows, stoic faces in oval frames, gazing with solemn pride. In the master bedroom, the world slows further still. The bed is high and layered, soft linens, embroidered pillows, and a thick patchwork quilt in muted colors. A wash basin and pitcher rest on a side table, beside a brush with ivory handles. The wallpaper here is lighter, more delicate, with tiny birds perched among blossoms. A faint breeze stirs the curtains, and the scent of rosewater from a nearby dressing table lingers. A letter lies folded on the coverlet, its seal broken but carefully preserved, the edges slightly curled from reading and rereading. On the windowsill, a small pot of violets reaches quietly toward the dim afternoon light. The children's room down the hall holds the memory of laughter. Wooden toys line the shelves, a painted soldier, a spinning top, a doll with glass eyes and a hand-stitched dress. A rocking horse sits in the corner, mid-gallop, as if waiting for the next ride. On the small bed lies a patchy woolen bear, one ear slightly loose, loved until threadbare. The nursery is warm and still. Pale wallpaper in tiny, faded stars. A cradle near the fire, gently rocked now and then by the softest push of an invisible hand. A lullaby lingers in the air, hummed earlier and still echoing in silence. Even the bathroom, modest and practical, holds its own charm. A clawfoot tub stands near the window, surrounded by white tile and folded towels. A bottle of lavender soap sits nearby, its scent relaxing and familiar. A sponge, a soft flannel, a folded dressing gown, all ready for evening's quiet ritual. And throughout the home, soft lamplight begins to glow as the sky outside dims. Each room illuminated not with brilliance, but with a gentle radiance. Candles flicker on mantels. Oil lamps cast dancing shadows on the floor. The fireplace pops softly in the parlor. A cat stretches before the warmth and settles in, its purr almost inaudible beneath the hum of the house. This Victorian home is not just brick and timber. It is peace and rhythm. A place where tea is poured slowly, where books are read by firelight, where moments are measured in heartbeats, and every creak of the floorboard tells a story. It is a world meant to be cherished gently, one quiet breath at a time. The hour of 3 o'clock arrives, and the home takes on a new rhythm. It is the hour of afternoon tea, a cherished ritual in Victorian England, not hurried, not extravagant, but steeped in grace and quiet delight. A time to pause. A time to gather. A time to sip warmth from a fine porcelain cup and speak softly beneath the ticking clock. The drawing room is prepared. Sunlight slips in through tall lace-covered windows, casting golden lines across the patterned rug. A small fire crackles in the grate, and on the hearth, a few warm coals glow beneath iron tongs and a neat pile of split wood. A round table is dressed with white linen, freshly pressed. The edges of the cloth hang evenly, with embroidery of tiny roses stitched in pale thread. At the center, a low vase holds a modest bouquet, violets, sprigs of rosemary, and a few cut tulips arranged with care. Their fragrance is faint but lovely, drifting into the warm air. On the table, the tea service is arranged. A polished silver tray with matching teapot, cream jug, and sugar bowl. The porcelain cups and saucers, delicate and painted with pastel flowers, sit waiting in even rows. Beside them, small silver spoons rest atop folded napkins, their edges trimmed in lace. The housemaid brings the tea in a quiet procession. First the sandwiches, cucumber, watercress, egg and cress, neatly trimmed and stacked in layers. Then the scones, warm from the oven, their buttery scent filling the room. Clotted cream, thick and pale, sits beside strawberry jam in tiny glass bowls. Small cakes follow, lemon drizzle, Victoria sponge, and petite eclairs, each decorated with just a touch of icing or fruit glaze. Soon the ladies begin to arrive, each with her own grace. Bonnets are removed and gloves set aside, hands freshly gloved in cotton and voices gentle with laughter. They settle into cushioned chairs and begin to chat, not with urgency, but with the flowing ease of companionship. They speak of novels recently read, of garden blossoms, of the latest from the post. They exchange sewing tips, share ribbon samples, and sometimes, in a hushed voice, pass along bits of the town's quietest gossip. But always softly. Always politely. One lady, the host, pours the tea. Her hands are steady and practiced. She lifts the teapot carefully, its spout carved in the shape of a lily, and tilts it just so. The tea flows, warm, amber, fragrant, into each cup. Some prefer theirs with a cube of sugar, others take it dark, or lightened with a drop of milk. The clink of spoon against porcelain is light, like a chime in a dream. Conversation continues with ease, as warm as the tea itself. One woman reads a short passage from a serialized novel printed in the week's paper. Another discusses a recent watercolor she painted of the countryside. There is talk of gowns, of a milliner's new fabrics, of the softest French muslin newly arrived from abroad. A gentle rain begins outside, tapping faintly against the glass. The room seems to lean in toward itself, as though savoring the shelter from the gray sky beyond. A cat curls on the windowsill, unbothered, watching the droplets with slow, blinking eyes. The scones are passed around again. A dollop of cream. A spoonful of jam. Laughter now and then, light and contained, as one lady recounts a mishap with a garden rake and her overcurious terrier. Between bites and sips, there are moments of silence. Not awkward, but comfortable. The sound of the rain fills the space. The ticking of the mantel clock, soft and constant, marks the slow passage of the hour. Then a musical interlude. One of the guests sits at the pianoforte, her fingers gentle on the keys. She plays a familiar tune, a melody that feels like memory. The music floats like a ribbon through the air, brushing the ceiling and curling back around the teacups and velvet chairs. No one speaks. All listen, quietly, their hearts resting. The tray of petit fours is offered once more, and the cakes vanish slowly. The tea, now cooled, is refilled with a second pot, this one infused with rose petals and a hint of orange peel. It steams lightly in the dimming room, the flavor delicate and bright. As the hour deepens, the ladies prepare to leave. Gloves are slipped back on. Bonnets are tied beneath chins. Coats are fastened gently. They thank the host with soft words and grateful smiles. Promises are made to meet again next week, for tea, or perhaps a walk along the canal if the weather is fair. Outside, the street has darkened beneath the rain clouds, and the gas lamps begin to glow again. One by one, the ladies disappear into the gray, umbrellas in hand, skirts lifted slightly above the puddles. Inside the drawing room, the table is cleared. The teacups are stacked and taken to the scullery. The fire, still warm, is left to smolder. The piano is closed. The chairs sit empty, but not lonely, only waiting. The house falls into silence once more. Not the silence of emptiness, but of contentment. The kind that lingers after good company and warmth. The kind that makes one pause before turning out the lamp. That moment, right before dusk, when everything feels quietly full. And in that stillness, the house holds its breath, waiting for evening to draw her curtain and tuck London in once again. As twilight begins to settle over London, the gaslights cast a warm glow across the streets, and the carriages grow fewer. The city quiets. But in the heart of St. James's, behind tall columns and polished mahogany doors, the day is not yet ready to end. Within these walls, tucked away from the rush of the world, the gentlemen's club begins to stir. The doorman, dressed in crisp livery and white gloves, tips his hat with a calm nod as a black carriage pulls to the curb. The door opens, and a gentleman steps down, his boots polished, his overcoat draped over one arm. He walks with a thoughtful pace, not hurried, not idle, the kind of rhythm that suits a place of leather chairs and low conversation. Inside, the air is warm and rich. The scent of pipe smoke, aged oak, and old books rests like a whisper in the halls. The ceiling is high, with decorative plaster and a chandelier that glows with a mellow amber light. Soft footfalls are absorbed by thick carpets in deep burgundy and navy, woven with patterns that twist like vines. The entrance hall is hushed, the kind of quiet that asks for no voice louder than needed. A few men speak in low tones by the coat rack. Others ascend the grand staircase, its banister smooth from generations of passing hands. The drawing room opens into space and stillness. High-backed leather chairs are arranged around low tables, where newspapers lay neatly folded. The fire crackles gently in a wide hearth, its light dancing across the brass fittings and paneled walls. A clock above the mantel ticks with slow, measured grace. In one corner, two gentlemen play chess, a quiet, deliberate match, each move made with a pause and thought. Their brows furrow, not from competition, but concentration. The ivory and ebony pieces gleam in the firelight, the board's red velvet edges catching the eye. Nearby, another gentleman sits alone, reading from a leather-bound volume. A glass of port rests beside him, untouched. His boots are crossed at the ankle. His cravat has been loosened ever so slightly. The pages turn with the softest rustle, the silence broken only by the occasional hiss of coal settling in the grate. A steward in dark tails glides silently across the room, offering cigars from a polished box. His presence is nearly invisible, like a shadow that moves only when needed. He refills a glass here, straightens a newspaper there, and disappears behind a velvet curtain just as quietly as he came. Along the shelves lining the room are books collected from decades past, travel accounts, scientific essays, poetry, and novels. A globe sits near a tall window, illuminated faintly by the lamplight. Its surface is faded, but the lands are clear, their names written in looping, dignified script. The men who gather here do not come for show or spectacle. They come for reflection. For the quiet company of those who understand the value of unspoken thought. They speak sparingly, their conversations drifting like pipe smoke in the air. Topics shift from politics to philosophy, from engineering marvels to curious stories from abroad. A recent letter from India is passed hand to hand, read aloud in fragments, its sender known to several of the men seated nearby. In another corner, the sound of billiard balls clinks gently in the next room. Laughter, low and restrained, echoes softly, accompanied by the faint tap of cues against the green velvet table. Gentle competition, wrapped in courtesy and calm. Downstairs, the dining room is lit by a row of crystal wall sconces. The table is long, polished to a mirror sheen, and set for a dozen, though only a few seats are taken this evening. The clink of cutlery is subtle, the clatter of a silver cover being lifted hushed by a butler's well-trained hands. Roast pheasant, minted peas, and soft Yorkshire puddings are served with practiced grace. The conversation remains light, a discussion of a recent opera, a memory of a summer spent in Dorset, the new bridge nearing completion over the Thames. After dinner, some return upstairs for brandy and conversation. Others retreat to the library, a long room lined with leather chairs and green-shaded lamps. Here, silence is honored above all. One man nods as he enters, acknowledging his fellows before turning his attention to a thick volume on ancient architecture. Another leafs through a journal of astronomy, his finger tracing the illustrations of distant stars. As night deepens, the club does not rush. Time here moves at a gentler pace. A man may sit by the fire for hours with no more company than the hum of his thoughts. Another may doze quietly, the soft folds of his coat bunched behind his head, his dreams undisturbed by those around him. The club is more than a gathering place. It is a refuge. A quiet retreat from the noise and motion of the outer world. Here, gentlemen are not judged by their words, but by their stillness. By the way they listen. By the way they carry silence like a companion. Outside, the fog has returned. It curls around the wrought iron railings and seeps along the stone steps. A gaslight flickers near the doorway, its flame steady but soft. When the hour grows late, the gentlemen begin to leave, one by one, stepping out into the cool night air, coat collars turned up, walking sticks in hand. They vanish into the mist, their minds quiet, their thoughts full. And within the club, the last fire burns low. The final candle is pinched out. A steward tidies the room in silence. The club rests again. Still, composed, and waiting patiently for the next twilight to bring its guests home once more. The first light of dawn has barely touched the rooftops, but already, the streets of Victorian London stir with quiet purpose. Among the earliest to rise is the street vendor, the quiet heartbeat of the city's daily rhythm, moving softly through the cobblestones before most windows are lit. With a wool scarf wrapped high on his neck and a cap pulled low, the vendor steps from a narrow doorway into the cool morning air. His boots are well worn, the soles patched more than once, but they carry him faithfully, step by step, cart in tow. The small wooden wheels creak softly as they roll, and the iron-framed lantern hanging from the side sways with each movement, casting long shadows on the wet cobbles. His stall is simple, a cart made from repurposed boards, its sides painted in fading blue. Neatly arranged inside are his wares for the day. Apples, fresh from the countryside. Loaves of crusty bread wrapped in muslin. A basket of ribbons in soft pastels. A few lengths of cheap lace. Sometimes pins, sometimes buttons. Whatever he could gather. Whatever might be useful. Whatever might sell. The mist clings to his sleeves as he walks. The streets are nearly silent, only the occasional clop of hooves in the distance, or the crack of a door opening to the first deliveries of milk and coal. But even in the hush, the vendor hums a quiet tune. A lullaby from his own childhood, perhaps. Soft and content. He sets up near a busy crossing where two lanes meet, just at the foot of a curved bridge. It's a good spot, close enough to catch the morning rush of workers, but not so crowded that he goes unnoticed. He lays out his goods carefully. A cloth goes down first, smoothed with his hands. Then the items, fruit polished, bread stacked like a small tower, ribbons unfurled to catch the eye. Soon, others join him, fellow vendors, each with their own trade. A woman with flowers, primroses, roses, and tiny daffodils in tin buckets. A man selling hot chestnuts, their smoky scent curling into the air. A child no more than 10, hawking matches, her hands wrapped in oversized gloves. There is no competition between them, only understanding. They nod to one another, exchange soft words, and begin their day. The street slowly comes alive. A carriage rattles past. The gas lamps flicker out one by one. A policeman strolls by, nodding kindly. From a nearby bakery, steam rises from the windows, warm and golden. The scent of rising dough wafts through the lane like an invitation to pause. The vendor calls out in a calm, steady voice, not too loud, not rushed. Fresh apples. Morning bread. Fine lace and buttons. Each phrase gently repeated. The words become a rhythm of their own, blending into the familiar hum of the street. A maid in a gray dress stops on her way to market. She selects a loaf, sniffs it, nods, and trades a few coins. A young boy, likely running errands for a tailor, picks through the buttons, selecting two matching ones for a worn waistcoat. The vendor smiles kindly and slips in an extra ribbon, just in case. Time passes, but without urgency. The sun never grows harsh here, only soft, muted behind shifting clouds. The street remains calm. A few children gather, peering at the fruit with bright eyes. One dares to ask the price of an apple. The vendor, with a small chuckle, offers it freely. The child beams, clutching it like treasure, and dashes off into the fog. At midday, he eats a crust of bread with a slice of cheese, leaning back against a lamppost. The noise has grown, but it's still not chaotic, just the city moving forward, in its own deliberate way. People pass. Some buy. Some don't. He doesn't mind. Each interaction is enough. A word here. A thank you there. A world contained in the smallest gestures. He watches as the world unfolds around him, a governess leading children across the street, a deliveryman unloading crates, a street performer balancing on stilts to the amusement of a gathered crowd. Life flows past his little stall, steady and slow, like the Thames just a few streets away. In the afternoon, a light rain begins to fall. The vendor covers his goods with a folded oilcloth, practiced in the motion. He stands beneath his umbrella, watching the passers-by pull their coats tighter, their steps quicker but not rushed. The rain here is familiar. Welcomed, even. It taps on rooftops, ripples and puddles, makes everything shine just a little more. He sells a few last items, a spool of thread, a handful of chestnuts from a nearby cart. Then, as the sky begins to dim, he starts to pack. The cloth folded. The unsold goods carefully stored. The cart's lid lowered with a click. He tips his cap to the flower girl. Nods at the match girl, still holding out her tray with hope. And slowly, he walks. Back through the winding lanes, where the cobblestones glisten in gaslight. Past the baker's shuttered window. Past a row of townhomes now glowing softly from within. He walks until he reaches a small doorway, where the cart is stored. The lantern is extinguished. The door closes. The day is done. He doesn't count the coins. Not right away. He pours a cup of tea instead. Sits at a wooden table by a narrow window. Outside, the fog has thickened again, wrapping London in its quiet shawl. He sips slowly, listening to the muffled city, and lets the stillness settle. The sound arrives before the sight, a soft, rhythmic clatter echoing down the lane. The wheels of a carriage turning on cobblestones. The steady, patient cadence of a horse's hooves. In Victorian London, the city breathes with this gentle movement, a dance of leather reins and polished wheels, of fine horses and the quiet dignity of motion. Carriages, both grand and humble, grace the streets with their presence. Some move swiftly with urgency, others roll gently, the kind meant for an afternoon ride. But whether noble landau or humble hansom cab, each one glides like a shadow across the city, part of its soft, ever-turning rhythm. A coachman perches atop his high seat, gloved hands gripping the reins, his top hat tilted forward to shield against the mist. He clicks his tongue gently to his horses, a pair of sleek bays with glossy coats and ribbons braided into their manes. Their breath clouds in the morning chill, and their hooves strike the stones with quiet authority. The carriage behind him is elegant but unassuming. Painted in deep green with brass fittings, its windows are curtained with cream lace. From within, the faint outline of a woman in bonnet and shawl can be seen, her posture poised as she watches the streets drift past, the chimneys, the flower carts, the schoolchildren in their caps. On a side road, a slower cab rolls by. The hansom, pulled by a single strong horse, is more modest. The driver hums as he guides the animal with ease, pausing now and then to let pedestrians cross, men tipping their hats, women nodding their thanks with quiet smiles. The streets are alive with this gentle choreography. A milk wagon creaks along, wooden wheels turning beneath the weight of clinking bottles. A delivery cart passes with parcels stacked high, the coachman expertly navigating tight corners without hurry. The horses, patient and trained, know their city as well as any man. For those with wealth, the carriage is a place of retreat. A private space between destinations. Curtains drawn, voices hushed. A gentleman leans back in a tufted leather seat, reading a folded paper as his journey carries him effortlessly through London's winding roads. A child peeks from another window, pointing at a puppy trotting down the street. Sometimes, a coach stops before a grand townhouse, where a butler steps out to open the gate. A footman in fine livery opens the carriage door, and the lady within descends slowly, her gloved hand resting in his for balance. The cobblestones glisten beneath her boots, the rain having just passed. Carriage wheels leave fine tracks behind them, shallow lines in the dirt and soot, soon swept away by wind and footsteps. But for a moment, they mark the way, tracing a path through time. Along the wide boulevards, wealthier carriages parade in the afternoon light. Couples sit side by side, speaking softly, the sound of their voices lost to the clip-clop of hooves. Some drive open landaus, their tops folded back, letting in the rare London sun. Others prefer closed broughams, warm and private, lit from within by small oil lamps. In Hyde Park, the scene is gentler still. There, carriages loop along the curved roads of the promenade, mingling with riders on horseback. The trees lean quietly over the paths. Sparrows flutter by. The wheels roll with such softness you might believe they float. A young woman leans from her carriage to watch a swan gliding on the lake. She says little, lost in thought, a gloved hand resting on the sill. Her companion, a gentleman with a kind face, watches her instead of the scenery, speaking in tones too low for anyone else to hear. Elsewhere in the city, the carriages serve all kinds of lives. A midwife's trap races toward an alleyway in the East End. A nobleman's coach waits outside the Royal Theatre. A school cart, painted red, carries children bundled in scarves and hats, laughing softly as they peer through fogged windows. At the stables, the horses are cared for like old friends. Their saddles and harnesses are rubbed clean with beeswax and leather oil. Their manes are brushed smooth, their hooves picked and polished. The stable hands speak to them in soft tones, giving them sugar cubes and pats on the neck. These animals know their routes, their stops, the feel of their master's voice. They trot, pause, and turn with ease, a silent dialogue between man and beast. As twilight approaches, the carriages continue to move, some heading toward the wealthier districts, others toward the smoky heart of the city. The lamps along the street begin to flicker on, their glow reflecting in the polished wood of the wheels and side panels. The coachmen light their own lanterns, hanging small brass lights on either side of their carriages. The flame inside flickers softly, lighting the path ahead, a golden bead in the growing dusk. The city slows, but the carriages continue. A lull settles over the streets, and still the wheels turn, steady, unhurried, graceful. Carriages move past each other like ghost ships at sea, their passengers shrouded in silence, their destinations unknown. Eventually, the last of the night carriages makes its way home. A coach pulls into its stable yard, the door swinging open with a creak. The horse snorts gently, tired but uncomplaining. The driver removes the harness with practiced hands, whispering to his companion like an old friend. The stable doors close behind them, and the city becomes still again. The city is still yawning when the chimney sweep begins his morning. The fog has barely lifted, the sky a dull gray sheet above the rooftops. Somewhere, a church bell tolls 6 times, its tones echoing down narrow alleys and over sloped roofs, where soot lingers like a quiet memory of every fire ever lit. With soft, steady steps, the sweep moves through the waking streets, a boy, slight and small, with a bundle of rods strapped across his back and a soot cloth draped over his shoulder. His boots are scuffed. His coat is worn. But there's a purpose in his movements, as if he understands something most others don't, that the warmth of every hearth depends on work done far above, where few ever glance. Victorian homes are built with pride, and their chimneys are many, narrow shafts of brickwork that stretch skyward like stitched seams of the city. These flues, hidden behind polished mantles and flickering flames, must be kept clear to breathe, to allow warmth to rise without smoke choking the rooms below. The sweep's job is to climb, brush, and clear. And so he does, with quiet skill and patient effort. Today's first house stands on a modest lane, its windows still shuttered, its inhabitants tucked in warm quilts. He knocks politely at the servant's door, and a maid lets him in with a drowsy nod, pointing to the hearth that needs his care. He lays down a soot cloth across the rug, careful not to disturb the furniture. The brush comes next, long and flexible, its bristles stiff with use. With smooth, practiced strokes, he sends it up the chimney, adding rods one by one, the brush climbing higher until the sound changes, a subtle scrape against brick, like a whisper through a tunnel. Soot begins to fall, soft as snow but dark as midnight. It gathers on the cloth like a strange winter. The sweep smiles faintly. It means the brush is doing its work. The chimney is clearing its throat, coughing out the clogs of long-burnt coals and ashes past. Not all chimneys are kind. Some are tight. others crooked. And still, the sweep goes where he must. In some homes, he'll climb, up narrow ladders, through tight attic spaces, onto the steep-angled roofs of the city, where the world feels impossibly vast and still. From the rooftops, the view is humbling. Rows of chimneys, some twin, some triple, others leaning like tired soldiers. The city below stretches wide and silent, only the soft bark of a dog or the distant creak of a carriage will reminding him that life stirs below. Up here, among birds and bricks, the sweep works quietly. He threads the brush down the flue, feeling for obstructions, listening to the faint scrape of bristles against soot-caked walls. His fingers are blackened, but they move with care, almost reverence. Each stroke is a restoration, a gentle coaxing of fire's passage. By mid-morning, the city is fully awake. Windows open. Kettles whistle. And smoke, clean, steady, and sure, begins to rise from chimneys newly cleared. A sign that fires can burn without fear. That warmth will find its way into drawing rooms, nurseries, and kitchens once more. The chimney sweep descends from a rooftop and receives a warm roll from the cook, a thank you wrapped in brown paper. He bows his head politely, tucks it away for later, and sets off down the street toward his next task. He passes other tradesmen along the way. A coal delivery man tips his cap. A bootblack whistles a cheery tune. Each of them part of the city's great, turning wheel, hands that keep homes running, unseen and uncelebrated. The sweep reaches another house, this one grander, with tall iron gates and ivy crawling along its stone facade. The butler regards him with a raised brow but lets him in. In the parlor, a lady sits reading a letter by the fire. She does not look up. He nods respectfully and begins his work in silence. This chimney proves stubborn, a bend near the top has caught a pocket of old ash. He climbs again, this time through a narrow access stair, the walls pressing close. At the roof hatch, he pauses for breath. The wind touches his face, and for a moment, the weight of soot and sweat fades in the breeze. He finishes the job before noon. The fire below burns brighter. The butler, though tight-lipped, presses a coin into his palm, a token of appreciation that will stretch further than most imagine. With the day's work nearly done, he makes his way back toward the sweep's yard, a modest workshop where brushes are stored, rods are mended, and clothes are hung to dry. Others like him gather there too. Some older, some younger. All marked by soot and shared understanding. They speak in quiet tones, exchanging notes on difficult chimneys, near misses, and lucky breaks. One boy shows off a new pair of gloves gifted by a kind homeowner. Another shares a story of seeing St. Paul's Dome up close, so high it felt like touching the sky. Later, as twilight settles in, the sweep walks home. His clothes still carry the scent of coal and smoke, but there is something comforting in it, a smell of usefulness, of fire made safe, of homes warmed through humble work. He passes families gathered around hearths. He sees windows glowing from within. Behind each pane, a fire flickers, a flame that dances without fear, because somewhere, a chimney was cleared, a path made safe. The stars begin to appear, one by one. The lamplighters move quietly through the streets, casting their glow upon the cobblestones. And in the stillness of the night, the chimney sweep disappears into the shadows, his silhouette merging with the quiet city. In a quiet corner of Victorian London, beneath a slate-grey sky and beside a lane where carriages clip-clop past, stands a modest brick building with tall windows and a sturdy wooden door. This is the schoolhouse, a place of learning, order, and quiet hopes. Though simple in appearance, within its walls, minds are shaped and futures quietly begin. It is early morning. The bell, hanging just above the door, clangs with a metallic echo, summoning sleepy children from all directions. Tiny boots scurry over cobblestones, polished or scuffed, depending on the home they come from. Bonnets are adjusted, collars straightened, lunch tins clutched in small hands. Inside, the classroom waits in stillness. Wooden desks sit in tidy rows, inkpots ready, slates cleaned, chalk laid neatly on the teacher's desk. A faint scent of varnish lingers in the air, mingling with the sharper smell of coal from the small stove crackling gently in the corner. The children file in, eyes curious or cautious, depending on the day. Some whisper, others offer polite, good mornings. Girls sit on one side, boys on the other, a line of distinction kept as firmly as the rules that hang on the wall. They place their belongings in woven baskets and settle onto hard benches, their backs straight, their hands folded. At the front of the room stands the schoolmistress, a figure of quiet authority, wrapped in a dark wool dress with lace at the cuffs, spectacles balanced delicately on her nose. Her voice, though soft, carries clearly across the room. "Good morning, children," she says. "Good morning, miss," they echo in practiced unison. And so, the day begins. First comes reading, a solemn chorus of young voices sounding out letters, syllables, words. Their primers are worn, the pages turned often and gently. Each child takes a turn, reading slowly from passages about moral lessons, noble deeds, and country life. Then, spelling. A ritual of repetition. The teacher calls a word, the children repeat it, then scratch it carefully onto their slates. The tap of chalk and the hush of concentration fill the room. Mistakes are gently corrected, not with harshness but with patience. Learning, here, is a slow and careful craft. Next, arithmetic. Fingers trace numbers along wooden counting frames. Simple sums are copied from the blackboard. A few children furrow their brows, struggling to hold numbers in their heads. But the teacher kneels beside them, her voice a soft thread guiding them through the maze. Outside the tall windows, the world continues, horses pass, birds flit among chimney tops, and clouds drift lazily by. But in this room, the children are far away, inside stories, inside sums, inside the strange magic of writing their names with perfect loops and careful strokes. The teacher speaks of Queen Victoria, of the Empire, of great inventions like the telegraph and steam engine. She describes faraway places, India, Canada, the golden sands of Egypt. The children listen with wide eyes, some imagining adventures they may never take, others simply enjoying the sound of the tale. Midday comes, and with it, the lunch break. The children pour out into the small yard behind the schoolhouse, their shoes kicking up bits of gravel. Laughter rings out. Games of tag begin. A few girls sit quietly, sharing jam sandwiches wrapped in cloth. Boys trade marbles or spin tops on the stone steps. There's a tree at the far end of the yard, its bare branches stretched like arms against the pale sky. Beneath it, two children sit cross-legged, reading a borrowed book, one finger trailing under each line, their heads touching slightly as they lean in to share. Soon, the bell rings again. Reluctantly, the children return indoors, cheeks flushed and hands chilled. The second half of the day brings copywork, long lines of cursive script copied with utmost care. They dip nibs into ink and form each letter with slow precision, the paper rustling softly beneath their sleeves. Then comes poetry. The children recite from memory, verses about seasons, about home and hearth, about the virtues of kindness and truth. Some speak with confidence. Others stumble shyly through their lines. The teacher smiles gently, correcting only when needed, encouraging all the same. In the final hour, the schoolmistress tells a story, her voice the softest sound in the room. The children listen, leaning forward, spellbound. It's a tale of a lighthouse keeper and his faithful dog, of storms and bravery, of light shining through fog. When the story ends, a hush falls. No one moves for a long moment. The teacher folds her hands and says, "That is all for today." The children rise and bow politely. They collect their belongings, tuck slates under arms, and file once more into the fading daylight. The wind has picked up, carrying with it the scent of coal smoke and wet leaves. The sky turns from gray to a dim, dusty blue. As the last child disappears around the corner, the schoolroom falls quiet again. The teacher closes the windows, folds her shawl around her shoulders, and takes a moment to sit alone at her desk. She looks out at the empty benches and smiles faintly. Tomorrow, the children will return. They will sit, and read, and write. And little by little, they will grow, in knowledge, in kindness, in the quiet dignity that this small room, with its old books and ticking clock, gently provides. Outside, gas lamps flicker on. A street sweeper hums a tune. And the sound of children's footsteps fades into the hush of evening, soft, like the close of a page, like the turning of time itself. The sun sets gently behind the rooftops of Victorian England, painting the sky in swaths of dusky lavender and quiet rose. Lamps flicker to life, one by one, as golden light spills into the cobbled streets and curls through lace curtains drawn just so. The day slows, softens, and draws inward. Inside a modest but well-kept townhouse nestled on a London crescent, the parlor prepares itself for a tranquil evening. The fire in the hearth crackles softly, warming the floral-patterned wallpaper and mahogany bookshelves that line the walls. A ticking mantel clock marks time with a steady, calming rhythm. This is not a place of hurry or grand noise. It is a sanctuary of peace and learning, a cocoon for the mind. The parlor is the heart of the home, a room for quiet conversation, soft music, and, most cherished of all, reading. The armchairs, deep and inviting, are dressed in rich velvet and tucked beside tables that bear porcelain teacups and half-finished embroidery hoops. A lamp with a milk glass shade casts a gentle pool of light over the pages of an open book resting on a doily-covered table. The family gathers one by one. The father, just home from his office, removes his spectacles and settles into his armchair with a newspaper folded neatly in hand. The mother, having tucked the youngest children into bed, glides into the room with a basket of knitting, her needles clicking softly like raindrops on a windowsill. The older children arrive next, books in hand, worn volumes of Dickens, Austen, and the Bronte sisters. Their spines cracked from love, their pages yellowed with time. Each child chooses a corner of the room, a window seat, a footstool by the fire, a cushion on the floor. And then, a hush falls. Not one of silence, but of deep, calm attentiveness. The only sounds are the rustle of pages turning, the occasional sip of tea, and the fire's gentle whisper. The father clears his throat and begins to read aloud. His voice smooth and mellow, floating through the air like music. Tonight's story is a tale of a village doctor, of moral trials and hidden kindnesses, of windswept moors and quiet redemption. The children listen, heads tilted, hands still. Even the family cat, curled in a circle on the hearth rug, seems to pause its purring to listen. Outside the window, gaslight halos drift in the light fog. The world beyond the parlor seems far away now, the busy streets, the carriages, the clamor. In here, it is only words and warmth, the comfort of story, the bond of shared imagination. Every so often, the mother interjects with a soft laugh or a gentle, "How lovely," especially when a character displays generosity or wit. The children follow the tale with growing anticipation, their eyes wide, occasionally glancing to one another in delight or concern. When the chapter ends, the father closes the book with a quiet finality. He removes his spectacles again, polishing them with a corner of his handkerchief. The children exhale, some sighing dreamily, others asking questions. What will happen next? Do you think she'll forgive him? But all in hushed tones, so as not to disturb the gentle peace of the moment. Next, the mother rises and crosses to the piano. She lifts the fallboard, revealing keys worn smooth by years of careful touch. She begins to play, a simple nocturne, something lilting and slow. The notes drip into the room like honey, and time seems to pause entirely. The children lean back, eyes closed. The father gazes into the fire. Outside, the fog thickens, muffling the world further, as though wrapping the house in cotton. When the music fades, the room glows with a quiet stillness, like the final pages of a beloved book. One of the older daughters begins to read poetry, her voice soft and unhurried. Now folds the lily all her sweetness up. and slips into the bosom of the lake. Her words rise and fall like waves on a gentle sea. No one speaks, they simply listen, together, connected by the thread of language, rhythm, and peace. Then, slowly, the hour grows late. The clock chimes gently, and the family begins to rise, stretching slowly. Books are closed with care, bookmarked precisely. Teacups are collected, knitting folded, the piano closed. Each person says their goodnights with a kiss or quiet hug. Footsteps ascend the wooden staircase, one by one, creaking just slightly. The light in the hallway is turned low. Doors click softly shut. And the parlor, once alive with stories and sound, becomes still once more. The fire settles into glowing embers. The scent of old books lingers faintly in the air, along with hints of lavender oil and soot. Outside, a lamplighter passes by, his steps fading into the night. This is Victorian England. Not only the grand halls or foggy streets, but this too, a parlor aglow with warmth, filled with stories passed from heart to heart, spoken in gentle tones for no audience but one another. And somewhere upstairs, a child slips beneath the covers, a book still tucked under their arm, the last line of the evening tale still echoing softly in their thoughts. The sun rises reluctantly over the smoky rooftops of Victorian England, its light filtered through a grey veil of morning mist and chimney smoke. It is a working day, like so many others, and the city slowly stirs from its slumber with a weary rhythm. In the heart of the industrial quarter, rows of red-brick factories stretch along the horizon, their tall chimneys exhaling thick plumes into the sky. The clatter and hum of machines are still faint, like the murmuring of giants waking from sleep. But soon, that sound will grow louder, filling the day with a constant, mechanical heartbeat. The streets begin to populate with quiet determination. Workers, young and old, shuffle toward the factory gates. Some carry metal lunch tins. Others walk in pairs, their conversation hushed and fleeting. The air is thick with cold and soot, yet their pace is steady, as if the rhythm of labor has etched itself into their very bones. The textile mill is one of the largest in the area. Its walls are streaked with decades of rain and ash, and its windows, though tall, are clouded with grime. But inside, the factory is alive, not with cheer or warmth, but with motion. Rows upon rows of machines clatter and spin. Looms snap to life with sharp, repetitive clicks. Long belts powered by steam engines drive their movement, stretching across wooden beams overhead like great black vines. In the weaving hall, the workers move with practiced precision. Girls, scarcely more than children, lean over looms, guiding threads with nimble fingers. Their eyes are focused, their mouths closed. Noise fills the room, a storm of metallic rhythm, so thick that one must learn to read lips or gesture to communicate. A young girl named Clara stands at her post, a shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders to ward off the morning chill. Her hands are quick and skilled, darting between threads like a pianist's. Despite the noise, she hums softly to herself, her melody drowned by the machines but alive in her mind. Beside her, an older woman watches the spinning frames. She checks for snags, adjusts tension, and every so often, offers Clara a brief nod of encouragement, a small kindness in an otherwise demanding place. Upstairs, in the sorting room, young boys carry baskets of raw cotton and spools of dyed thread. Their boots scuff across wooden floors that creak under the weight of decades of industry. They speak little, their thoughts focused on finishing their tasks before midday, when a few precious minutes of rest will be allowed. Outside the building, the boiler room hums with power. Great coal furnaces burn day and night, tended by men with blackened hands and soot-streaked faces. Their labor is hot and constant, the heat of the fire a searing contrast to the morning chill beyond the factory walls. Yet even amid all this motion, there are moments of softness. A boy pauses to tie the frayed laces of his boot. A girl shares a crust of bread with a friend during a brief break. And outside, a woman from the neighborhood delivers baskets of tea in thick porcelain mugs, the warmth of it offering a moment's comfort. Lunch comes with a whistle, a loud, echoing blast that halts the looms for a short while. Workers pour out into the yard, blinking in the gray daylight. They sit on crates and stone steps, pulling sandwiches from waxed paper, sipping weak tea from tin cups. Here, conversation flickers to life. They speak of families, of the price of coal, of news heard at the market. A few smile. Others simply rest their hands. One girl reads a page of a borrowed book, holding it carefully with smudged fingers. Then, too soon, the whistle sounds again, and they return to the machines. Afternoon light slants through the grimy windows, casting golden beams that catch the dancing dust in the air. The repetition continues, thread, weave, tie, twist, hour after hour. The workers' motions are like clockwork, synchronized and steady, their faces calm but far away, perhaps thinking of home or the countryside they left behind. As the shift draws to a close, the machines begin to slow. The great steam engine hisses as pressure is eased. One by one, the looms fall silent, until the entire hall is filled with a different kind of stillness, the soft echoes of a day spent in constant motion. The workers gather their things. Hands, tired and raw, are wiped on aprons. Baskets are emptied. Lights are dimmed. The factory, once so loud and alive, becomes a quiet, echoing shell. Outside, the sun sets low behind the chimneys, casting long shadows across the cobbled streets. Smoke and golden light blend into a dusky haze as the workers walk home once more. Clara walks beside her friend, their boots clicking softly. She speaks now, her voice barely above a whisper, about her dreams of becoming a teacher someday. Her friend nods, hopeful. In this gray world, dreams are delicate things, but not impossible. As the factory recedes behind them, so does its weight. The noise, the soot, the endless rhythm, all melt into the background. Ahead lies home, and perhaps a warm bowl of stew, a wool blanket, a brief story by firelight before sleep. The factory is quiet again. Its looms rest. The steam engine sleeps. The dust in the air settles gently to the floor. This is the hidden pulse of Victorian England, not only in parlors and parks, but here too, in the hearts of those who keep its machines turning, who work by gaslight and live for moments of stillness. Sunday arrives like a soft sigh over the rooftops of Victorian England. The busy clang of the week fades into silence, replaced by the gentle chime of church bells ringing across town. Their sound rolls over cobblestone streets and ivy-covered cottages, calling all toward a moment of peace and reflection. The streets, usually bustling with carts and chatter, are calm this morning. The air is still, kissed by the faintest breeze. Smoke from chimneys rises slowly, blending into pale blue skies. Men, women, and children step quietly from their homes, dressed in their finest clothes, pressed wool coats, polished boots, and hats carefully positioned just so. Across the countryside and in the heart of towns alike, small chapels and grand churches open their wooden doors. Inside, the scent of old wood and beeswax polish fills the air. Candles flicker in their brass holders. The stained glass windows glow with the morning sun, casting soft, colorful light across stone floors and wooden pews. In a small village nestled along the edge of a green hill, the chapel bell tolls once more. Its chime echoes gently through the valley. Here, families walk together up the worn stone path leading to the chapel steps. A little girl in a blue bonnet holds tightly to her mother's hand, her eyes wide at the sight of the glowing windows. Inside, the vicar stands near the altar, quietly preparing for the service. His robes are freshly pressed, his voice gentle as he welcomes each visitor with a nod or a warm handshake. A few elderly ladies settle into their usual seats near the front, whispering softly to one another about the weather, about their gardens, about how quickly the seasons seem to pass. The organist, an older man with silver hair and kind eyes, adjusts the hymn sheets. His hands hover over the keys, and with a slow breath, he begins the opening chords. The notes rise like mist, filling the chapel with solemn beauty. As the melody takes shape, the congregation stands and sings. Voices blending in harmony, some soft and fragile, others full and rich. Children sit beside their parents, legs swinging from wooden benches. A few fidget with ribbons and buttons, their attention drifting now and then to the colored light that dances across the floor. But even the youngest seem to sense the hush of the day, the way Sunday wraps the world in a slower rhythm. The sermon begins with quiet clarity. The vicar speaks not with fire and thunder, but with calm conviction. He talks of kindness, of honesty, of tending to one another like a shared garden. His words flow slowly, like the stream that runs behind the chapel, steady, peaceful, enduring. Outside, the chapel garden is in bloom. White daisies nod their heads beside the stone wall. Bees hum lazily in the lavender bushes. A robin hops along the window ledge, pausing to peer inside with a curious eye. When the final hymn is sung, the candles are gently snuffed, and the service draws to a close. The congregation files out into the sunshine, their faces softened by stillness. They speak in low tones, offering smiles and simple greetings. Some linger in the yard, exchanging news or admiring the flowers. A few families walk together down the hill, sharing stories of the past week, discussing the roast waiting at home, or the warm pudding to follow. For many, Sunday is not simply a day of worship, it is a chance to breathe, to be still, to connect. Children run ahead toward open fields, their laughter light and quick. Elders stroll more slowly, their steps measured in content. In town, Sunday holds its own rituals. Streets are quiet, shops closed, the usual rush paused. In the park, couples sit on benches beneath leafy branches, reading quietly or feeding crusts of bread to ducks in the pond. The sounds of hammers and horses are replaced by birdsong and distant bells. Later in the day, some may return to the chapel for evening prayer, where candles glow once more, and shadows stretch long across the pews. The vicar may read passages by lantern light, his voice the only sound in the stillness. In that hour, the chapel feels like a sanctuary not just from the week's labor, but from the worries of the world. In homes across the land, supper is served early on Sundays. Families gather around wooden tables, hands washed, faces rosy from the walk home. There is roast beef, potatoes, warm bread, and sweet jam tarts for dessert. The table is a place of laughter and sharing, of gratitude for simple things. After dinner, the pace slows even more. Mothers mend clothing by the fire. Fathers read newspapers or polish boots for the week ahead. Children lie on the rug, paging through picture books or drawing quiet sketches in their notebooks. The last light of Sunday casts a golden hue across the wallpaper. Candles are lit. The kettle boils. The room fills with the scent of tea and soot and something warm and familiar, the feeling of rest. As evening deepens, the chapel on the hill glows once more, its bell now silent, its doors closed. The world prepares for another week, but tonight remains suspended in softness. Somewhere, a family finishes their final hymn of the day, sung not in a church, but at home, by hearthlight. The notes float upward into the quiet dark, a lullaby for the weary world. And so ends another Sunday in Victorian England, a day wrapped in calm, in quiet faith, in stillness and light. A gentle breath before the Monday rush. Step softly now into a dressing room of quiet splendor, where fabric rustles like the hush of leaves and the mirror glows with morning light. In Victorian England, fashion was more than dress, it was ritual, identity, and grace wrapped in silks, lace, and carefully chosen detail. It begins with the faint clink of a drawer opening. A lady's maid smooths out a linen chemise, freshly laundered and crisp with starch. It is the first layer, light and plain, drawn over the skin like a whisper. The dressing process is a ceremony of patience, care, and layers upon layers of finery. The corset comes next, laced not tightly but firmly, shaping the figure into the favored silhouette, narrow waist, full hips, and a proud posture. Fingers move deftly, threading ribbons and pulling gently. The lady stands still, arms raised slightly as the next garments follow, a petticoat, soft and swaying, then another for fullness. Some wear 3, some wear 5. Each tier adds weight and structure until the gown itself can rest upon a cloud of linen and lace. The gown, today, is made of deep plum silk, its hem embroidered with tiny violets. The fabric gleams in the light like still water. Delicate buttons march up the back, each one fastened with care. A brooch is pinned at the collar, perhaps a keepsake from a mother, or a miniature portrait of a loved one. Gloves are drawn on with gentle tugs, white kid leather, soft as breath. A bonnet is tied beneath the chin, its ribbons satin and neat. The final touch is perfume, just a drop on each wrist. Perhaps a lavender water, or rose oil, subtle and floral. Now she steps to the mirror, not to admire in vanity, but to ensure every line is straight, every pleat smooth. She lifts her chin. Not for pride, but for readiness. Men, too, take care in their dress. The morning suit is chosen with precision. Trousers pressed to a sharp crease, waistcoat snug and tailored, and a black frock coat that sweeps just below the knees. A stiff collar and cravat are arranged with practiced fingers, folded and pinned just so. Polished shoes gleam. A top hat is brushed before it's worn. Fashion in Victorian England was not rushed. It was assembled, piece by piece, with intention and pride. Every button, every trim spoke of taste and occasion. The working class wore simpler garments, durable and practical, but even they found ways to add touches of care. A bright scarf, a clean apron, a newly darned sleeve. Sunday best was reserved for chapel, neatly folded in drawers all week long. Children were dressed as miniature adults. Little boys in sailor suits and velvet coats. Girls in pinafores and ribboned bonnets. Their shoes were polished, their curls pinned, and often they stood impatiently as grown hands adjusted their collars or straightened hems. In drawing rooms and parlors, fashion reflected social order. The rustle of skirts followed the conversation, fans fluttered slowly, gloves were removed finger by finger. Women sat upright, the stiffness of corsets enforcing a poise that became second nature. There were trends, too, that traveled across class and town. Crinolines ballooned outward like floating bells. Later, bustles appeared, shifting the silhouette back in a gentle arc. Hair was worn high and pinned with care, braided, twisted, adorned with jeweled combs or delicate feathers. At night, when the gas lamps were lit and music floated from the parlor, evening attire emerged like a secret world. Ladies wore gowns of velvet or tulle, with bare shoulders and pearl chokers. Men changed into black tailcoats, crisp white shirts, and gleaming boots. The colors of the wardrobe spoke in whispers, deep greens for quiet walks, pastels for tea visits, jet black for morning. Morning dress was its own language. Worn for months or even years, depending on the closeness of the departed. Veils, black crepe, and minimal jewelry conveyed loss with dignity. Yet even in sorrow, the care in dress remained. Clothing was how Victorians carried emotion, joy, loss, ambition, humility, stitched into fabric and form. Dressmakers and tailors were artists of the needle. In dim workrooms lined with bolts of fabric and stacks of patterns, they cut and stitched by hand. Measurements were taken with care, pins held between lips, and chalk lines marked with soft flourishes. Each garment was a story, bespoke and deliberate. In cities like London, Bond Street and Regent Street displayed fashion in glossy windows. Ladies paused on cobbled walks to peer in, admiring mannequins in the latest Paris-inspired designs. The fashion pages of magazines like the Queen and Godey's Ladies' Book offered illustrations, fine sketches of corsets, collars, and coiffures, drawn with delicate ink. At the heart of it all was not vanity, but ritual. To dress in Victorian England was to align oneself with the rhythm of the day, the expectations of society, and one's place in it. Clothing created a frame, through which the self, however quiet, could be seen. By evening's end, the ritual reversed. The gown is carefully unbuttoned, lifted off like petals from a flower. Corsets are loosened. Soft nightgowns replace the day's structure, and hair is brushed in long, gentle strokes. Slippers rest beside the fire. A shawl is drawn across the shoulders. And by candlelight, in the soft hush of bedtime, the mirror reflects not a costume, but the quiet grace beneath it. The garments of the day are folded and laid to rest. Silk sighs into drawers. Leather gloves are lined up side by side. Jewelry is placed in velvet-lined boxes, waiting for morning. Outside the window, the world sleeps beneath its own blanket of stars. The bells are still, the gas lamps flicker, and the city's heart beats low and slow. Imagine the morning sun rising slowly over Victorian London, casting a golden shimmer through drifting mist. As the city stirs awake, Hyde Park becomes a place of calm, a green haven in the heart of stone and soot. The gates creak open with the gentlest sigh, and early footsteps fall upon dew-speckled paths. A light breeze whispers through the leaves of towering elms and horse-chestnut trees. Their branches sway with sleepy elegance, and the faint rustle overhead sounds like a lullaby. Birds chirp with quiet cheer, hopping along iron railings and fluttering from perch to perch in gentle harmony. Ladies in long skirts stroll arm in arm, parasols twirling idly in gloved hands. Their laughter is soft, their steps unhurried. Some wear pale muslins for morning airings, others don richer velvets for carriage rides through the tree-lined lanes. The hems of their dresses brush the gravel as they walk, sweeping behind them like the tail of a calm breeze. Gentlemen pass in top hats and tailored coats, walking sticks tapping softly in rhythm. They nod politely to those they meet, exchanging pleasantries with a reserved grace. A few carry small books tucked beneath their arms, ready for a bench-side reading beside the Serpentine. The Serpentine lake glistens beneath the open sky, calm and wide like a polished silver tray. Swans glide across the water, their feathers pristine and still. Ducks trail behind in rippling lines, leaving wakes like brushstrokes upon the surface. From time to time, a rowboat drifts past, its oars dipping with soft splashes. Nearby, children giggle in their Sunday best, tossing crumbs to birds or skipping along the edge of the water under their nanny's watchful eyes. Their voices rise and fall like songbirds in spring, never sharp, just lively enough to warm the air. At Rotten Row, horses clip-clop gently along the riding path. Their hooves press into the sandy track with practiced grace, heads held high, riders straight-backed in their saddles. Some wear hunting coats, others more refined riding dress, and the horses are well-groomed and steady. Park benches, painted dark green and set beneath flowering trees, offer rest to passers-by. A seamstress sits with her sewing, needle rising and falling in rhythmic quiet. A scholar reads beneath the wide shade of an oak. Two elderly friends share a thermos of tea, steam curling like smoke from a chimney on a crisp morning. The scent of damp grass, lilacs, and distant chimney smoke floats on the air. A gardener gently trims the hedges, shears snipping with soft precision. Wicker baskets filled with clippings sit at his feet, and robins hop nearby, watching curiously. Flower beds burst with color, tulips, pansies, roses, and lavender arranged in symmetrical beauty. Bees hum from blossom to blossom, their small wings buzzing like a distant lullaby. The petals nod in the breeze, greeting each passerby with gentle grace. As the day unfolds, the park fills in waves. A governess pushes a pram down the lane, wheels humming on the path. Young lovers stroll by the water's edge, walking in silence save for the occasional whisper. A clergyman makes his way to the bandstand, where brass musicians will soon perform their afternoon melodies. But for now, the world remains hushed. A peaceful rhythm pulses through the park, of footsteps on gravel, the flutter of birds, the swish of skirts. All is calm. Along the footpaths, ornate iron lamps stand tall, soon to be lit again when twilight falls. For now, they rest in the sunlight, shadows long and lean behind them. In one quiet corner of the park, an artist unrolls a canvas and begins to paint. His brush captures the curve of the lake, the golden green of the trees, and the silhouettes of passers-by. He works in stillness, save for the occasional pause to sip from his flask or adjust his palate. Nearby, a poet leans back on a bench, notebook open on her lap. Her pencil moves slowly, words forming like smoke, soft and fleeting. A daffodil nods in the breeze beside her, as if in approval. When the sun reaches its peak, the park feels like a dream held just beneath waking. The clouds drift lazily overhead, shaped like carriages, crowns, or coiling smoke. No one rushes. Even time seems to step quietly here. Later, as the shadows lengthen, carriages line the outskirts of the park, their horses stamping gently. Ladies are helped inside with gloved hands, skirts gathered as they settle. Gentlemen tip their hats, conversations drift to quiet farewells, and the park slowly returns to stillness. The lamps are lit one by one, casting warm halos of yellow light that shimmer in the cooling air. The serpentine reflects the lamplight, flickering like candlelight on water. The birds quiet. The last walkers make their way home, footsteps softer now. As the sky deepens from gold to lavender, then to the rich navy of approaching night, Hyde Park sleeps once more. Trees whisper to one another. The breeze settles into stillness. And London, in all its Victorian splendor, rests gently beneath the stars. As twilight settles over the rooftops of Victorian London, the city changes its tune. Lamps flicker to life along the cobbled streets, and the scent of roasted chestnuts drifts from street corners. Among the flickering gaslights, one building stands aglow with warmth and laughter, the music hall. It begins with a distant murmur, as though the night itself is whispering a secret. Footsteps approach, cloaked in anticipation. Gentlemen in evening coats and ladies in bonnets trimmed with ribbon pass through the entrance. Their tickets rustle softly in gloved hands, and their breath curls in the cool night air as they wait in quiet lines. The music hall is alive with a subtle magic. Outside, it looks modest, brick walls, arched windows, a wooden door polished with years of touch. But inside, the world opens wide. Velvet drapes line the stage, catching the candlelight and holding it in folds of crimson. Carved balconies curve above like the edges of a music box, adorned with gilded trim and flickering wall sconces. The seats creak gently as people settle in. Murmurs float like mist, soft conversations, the rustle of skirts, the clearing of throats. Somewhere backstage, the first chords are tested, a quiet strum of violin, a tap of drumsticks. The air smells of wax, wood, and cologne. The lights dim slightly. The hall hushes. A single curtain sways, then draws aside with a silky sigh. The evening begins. The pianist strikes the opening notes, rich and warm. Then, a voice joins, clear and cheerful, as the first performer steps into the light. She wears a feathered hat, a sparkling bodice, and a smile that shines brighter than the chandeliers above. She sings a tune of love lost and found, of rainy walks through Hampstead Heath, of teacups and train rides and hearts full of hope. The melody is simple and sweet, the kind that nestles into your memory and stays. The audience claps politely. Laughter follows as the next act takes the stage, a comic in checkered trousers, juggling wooden pins while telling light-hearted tales of everyday London life. His jokes are never sharp, only soft and silly, like a wink between old friends. The room fills with chuckles and sighs of delight. A magician follows, pulling ribbons from his sleeve and making coins disappear with sleight of hand. Children in the gallery gasp. A lady in the front row leans forward, enchanted by the quiet sparkle of illusion. Between each act, the curtain closes and the orchestra plays, gentle tunes, familiar waltzes, a lullaby now and then. You can hear the soft brush of the conductor's hand guiding the musicians. The violins hum like drowsy bees. The flutes whisper through twilight. A young man steps forward with a poem. His voice is low and steady, words unfolding like petals in bloom. He speaks of river walks, candlelight letters, and the ache of distant dreams. The hall is silent as he reads. Even the air seems to listen. Later, a duet enchants the room, two voices twining like ivy, delicate and true. Their harmony is warm, wrapping around the audience like a woolen shawl on a winter night. Between the songs, refreshments are served in the side parlor. Tea in porcelain cups, scones with clotted cream, and sugared almonds in glass jars. Waiters glide silently, their trays balanced like poetry in motion. Outside, carriages wait, wheels still turning from the journey here. Steam rises from the horses as they stamp the ground in patient rhythm. But no one leaves just yet. Not while the final number is near. The last act of the evening takes the stage, an older woman with a stringed harp beside her. She wears a gown of deep plum, her hair pinned neatly with silver combs. She speaks little, only smiles, and then begins to play. Her fingers move slowly, reverently. The harp sings a song from long ago, one passed down through lullabies and whispered memories. The room is utterly quiet. Even the flickering candles pause, as if they too are listening. The music is soft, almost weightless. Like fog across the Thames. Like snow falling on stone steps. Like dreams that come when the night is kind. And when the final note fades into the warm silence, there is no applause. Only a long, gentle stillness, the kind that fills the heart more than sound ever could. Then the lights begin to brighten once more. Coats are gathered. Hats adjusted. The audience drifts out slowly, some humming the tunes, others still wrapped in the spell of song. The music hall empties, leaving behind echoes in velvet and the faint scent of rosewater and lamp oil. The stage is quiet again, the curtain drawn. Outside, the streets hum softly with nighttime life. But in your mind, the melodies linger. They follow you down the lantern-lit roads, through the creak of the carriage, past the echo of boothiels on cobblestones. And when you finally return home, when the lamps are extinguished and the covers pulled close, that music hall stays with you, a gentle concert of dreams, replaying in the hush of your imagination. As darkness thickens over the rooftops of London, a hush falls across the city. In the drawing rooms of Victorian homes, the gas lamps are dimmed, and candles are lit one by one, each flame a gentle invitation to stillness. In a modest townhouse along a quiet lane, the household prepares for evening. The day's duties are done. The last cup of tea has been taken, the hearth is swept, and a kettle murmurs gently on the iron stove. Outside, the fog settles against the windowpanes, softening the world beyond into a watercolor of shadows and light. Inside, a single room glows with a dozen candles, tall and thin, set into brass holders and ceramic sconces. Their flames sway with a quiet rhythm, casting golden pools on the wallpaper and soft gleams across the edges of porcelain teacups. The family gathers slowly. A father lowers his newspaper. A mother smooths the creases of her apron. Children climb onto footstools with books in hand, the corners worn and covers gently faded by many nights of reading. There is no rush now. No noise or hurry. Only the ticking of a mantel clock, the distant rattle of carriage wheels outside, and the occasional pop of coals shifting in the fireplace. A young woman lifts her embroidery, her needle glinting as it dances through linen. Thread in shades of rose and sage winds through her fingers, stitching delicate patterns into quiet beauty. She hums as she works, a lullaby, barely above a whisper. Near the window, a boy traces shapes in the glass, his breath fogging the pane as he watches the glow of the street lamps below. He imagines what it might be like to float above the rooftops, carried on the quiet breeze, candlelight winking up at him from every home. The room smells of lavender and wax, with a faint touch of cinnamon from a jar left open earlier in the kitchen. It is a scent that clings to memory, comforting and warm. On the mantel, a row of silhouettes cut from black paper rest in wooden frames, family portraits made by hand at a fair long past. The candlelight brings them to life, casting matching shadows on the wall behind. Conversation begins softly. A story is shared about a trip to the greengrocer, where apples tumbled from their baskets and a kindly vendor offered an extra pair just because. Another tale follows, of the cat that leapt into the flower bin again, powdered from head to tail like a ghost of the pantry. Laughter comes gently, like ripples on a quiet pond. It doesn't disturb the peace, it joins it. A book is opened. Its spine creaks a little from age, and the pages are turned with care. Tonight, it is a tale of adventure, a boy and his dog traveling the countryside by rail, meeting friendly strangers and learning the language of landscapes. The reader's voice is smooth and slow, filling the room like a comforting shawl. Eyes grow heavier as the story winds on, words spinning pictures in the flickering candlelight, of moonlit meadows, country inns, and stars overhead like watchful eyes. Time drifts. There is no sense of the hour, only the feeling of night deepening. Candles burn lower, their wax slipping down the sides in slow rivers. Shadows lengthen across the carpet, the fire glows with a steady pulse, and outside, the world seems held in a deep exhale. A letter lies on the side table, half-written, ink drying in a careful curl of script. It is meant for a cousin in Yorkshire, full of well-wishes and thoughts about the spring garden. The pen rests beside it, its nib glinting in the candle's golden edge. A grandfather clock chimes softly from the hall. Not a startling sound, more like a reminder that dreams wait just beyond the edge of waking. Slippers shuffle across the floor as the family begins to rise, yawns hidden behind sleeves. The fire is banked, the candles snuffed with quiet poise, one by one. A brass snuffer leans in, gently kissing the flames goodnight. The room darkens, but it does not feel empty. The warmth lingers, in the walls, in the quiet air, in the hearts of those who've shared the stillness. Steps move up the stairs, slow and sleepy. Doors creak gently open, then close with padded finality. The night wraps itself around the house like a velvet coat. Outside, the fog curls through alleyways and over rooftops, keeping secrets and silences alike. In a small bedroom upstairs, a single candle is still lit. A child sits beneath a quilt, eyes heavy, watching the flame. It dances, then stills, then dances again, as if breathing. In a quiet Victorian study, the world slows to the hush of pen on paper. The room is small but warm, lined with bookshelves, filled with leather-bound volumes, worn spines and golden titles catching the amber glow of a nearby lamp. A writing desk rests by the tall window, its surface smooth from years of gentle use. Outside, the sky is overcast, a calm gray curtain filtering soft daylight into the room. It is the perfect afternoon for reflection, for thoughts gathered in ink and sealed with wax. On the desk sits an inkwell, dark as midnight, and beside it, a quill trimmed and ready. Its feather is pure white, with a slight curve, as if it remembers the shape of wind. The writer, a middle-aged woman in a lace-trimmed shawl, dips the nib slowly, allowing it to soak just enough to write without splatter. Her movements are patient and calm. She knows the feel of the page beneath her wrist, the exact pressure needed to form the loops of her G and the gentle peaks of her M. The paper itself is heavy and cream-colored, just slightly textured, a soft resistance under the nib's gentle scratch. She writes to her sister, who lives by the sea, in a cottage with ivy climbing its walls. The letter opens with warmth, "My dearest Catherine," the words that follow are quiet gifts, describing the garden blooming with hollyhocks, the neighbor's new puppy, the way the chimney whistles in the wind at night. Each sentence is a thread that ties two hearts across the miles. In this age before telephones and instant news, a letter is an event, something to be treasured, reread, and folded neatly into a keepsake box. Around her, the room is still. The fire has gone to embers, the teacup is nearly empty, and the only sound is the rhythmic scratch of the quill, like the whisper of wind through dry leaves. A clock ticks gently above the mantel, its pendulum swinging with quiet conviction. A candle flickers softly, its flame mirrored in the brass button of a writing box nearby. The room carries a scent of old wood, faint lavender, and the tiniest trace of fresh ink. She pauses sometimes, not from lack of ideas, but from deep consideration. In her mind, she is walking beside her sister on the beach, feeling the pebbles underfoot, watching the gulls swoop low. The letter is a kind of journey, one that moves from her heart, through her hand, across the page, and finally into the hands of someone loved. Her handwriting is elegant, with a slight rightward slant, not rigid, but full of personality. The capital letters are tall and gracious, while the lowercase curl with ease. These lines carry more than words. They carry presence. Time. Care. Not far from her desk, a child practices his alphabet. He sits cross-legged on a rug, slate board in his lap, copying letters from a small book balanced on his knee. His tongue peeks from the corner of his mouth, and he erases and tries again, eager to master each stroke. His mother glances over her shoulder with a quiet smile. She remembers when she, too, struggled with the difference between B and D. Now her hands dance across the paper like a waltz. Outside, a postman walks slowly up the lane. His cap is tipped low, and the canvas bag at his side rustles with folded secrets, news, invitations, and long-awaited replies. He pauses at each gate, opening the iron latch with a practiced hand, slipping letters into brass slots and wooden boxes. Soon, this very letter will be among them. When it is finished, she reads it once more, not for correction, but for rhythm. For tone. It is as much music as it is message. She signs it, "Your ever-loving sister, Margaret," and folds it into thirds with care. She lights a stick of sealing wax and lets it drip onto the flap, then presses her signet ring into the warm puddle. A soft hiss, a pause, and the wax cools, a small red circle, now marked with a delicate M. She sets it aside on the windowsill, where the light falls like a blessing, and prepares to write another, this one to her cousin in Bath, full of questions about the ball and how the lilacs are doing this year. Elsewhere in the house, the child giggles, he's written his name backward. But to him, it is magic. The letters came from his fingers, and they belong to him now. This is the gentle power of writing in the Victorian age, not fast, not flashy, but deeply personal. It is the art of reflection and connection. A moment of stillness shaped by ink and intention. The quill rests now in its holder. The inkwell is capped. The paper rustles faintly as the envelope is tucked with the others in a stack, tied with a blue ribbon. Letters to go out. Letters to come in. Little vessels of thought, adrift in the sea of time. As evening nears, the writer leans back in her chair. The day has slipped by softly, wrapped in words. She gazes out the window at the pale clouds drifting overhead, and with a soft sigh, she smiles. In Victorian England, Christmas was not just a day. It was a season of warmth in the coldest time of year, a slow, fragrant unfolding of traditions, memories, and soft candlelight. As December settled its frost across rooftops and fields, the air seemed to hum with quiet anticipation. The fire in the hearth burned a little brighter, the aroma of cloves and cinnamon began to linger in every kitchen, and windows were dusted with condensation as warm rooms looked out into chilly streets. At the heart of this season stood the home, its halls lovingly decorated with evergreen garlands, woven by hand with holly, ivy, and mistletoe. Children would help, gathering greenery from the woods or nearby hedgerows, returning with cheeks pink from the cold, their arms full of branches still beaded with frost. Each garland was draped carefully across mantels, stair rails, and doorways. Red ribbons tied the corners, and sometimes oranges, rare and precious, were studded with cloves and hung as ornaments. Their scent was sweet and spicy, carrying through rooms like whispers of distant lands. In the parlor, a fir tree stood tall and proud. Decorated with handmade paper chains, delicate glass baubles, and lit with real candles, each one placed in tiny holders, watched carefully while they burned. At night, their flickering light danced across the ceiling, casting shadows that made the room feel enchanted. The tree was a relatively new tradition, brought to England by Prince Albert, who had shared it from his German childhood. But quickly, it became beloved, a centerpiece of Victorian Christmas cheer. Beneath the tree, small gifts were placed, modest in size, but wrapped with love. A wooden top for a boy, a cloth doll for a girl, a book of poetry for a young lady, or a hand-knitted scarf for a gentleman. There was joy not just in receiving, but in the giving, the choosing, the wrapping, the ribbon tied just so. In the kitchen, the day before Christmas was alive with gentle hustle. Puddings boiled in cloth bags, hung like treasure sacks over simmering pots. Mince pies were prepared with care, their crusts dusted with sugar. A goose might be roasting, filling the house with savory warmth, while bowls of punch sat nearby, steeped with spices and fruit. By evening, the family would gather. The table was set with simple beauty, white linens, polished silver, and candles lit one by one. Grace was said softly, and then the feast began, not in haste, but with gratitude. Laughter rose gently. Stories were told. Crumbs were caught on napkins, and children sat wide-eyed at the marvel of it all. Even the coldest corners of the house seemed to glow with shared warmth. After dinner, the drawing room welcomed all. Music floated from the piano, old carols, sung softly by firelight. God rest ye merry, gentlemen, the holly and the ivy, and Silent Night. Some sang along, others simply listened, heads tilted, hearts full. Then came the reading of ghost stories, a most Victorian tradition. Tales told in hushed tones while shadows flickered on the walls. Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol was a favorite. The story of Scrooge, of Marley's ghost, and the redemption found in kindness and generosity, it resonated deeply with the Victorian spirit. And always, always, there was the message of compassion, of reaching out to those in need, of remembering the poor and lonely. Charity boxes were filled, coal was delivered to those without, and letters were written to brighten someone's winter. In churches, the midnight bell rang out across snow-covered streets, inviting all to candlelit services. There, voices rose in harmony beneath high stone arches, echoing with peace and reverence. Candles flickered along the pews. The scent of wax and pine mingled with cold air slipping through stained glass windows. At home once more, stockings were hung at the end of children's beds. Not extravagant, but filled with care, an orange, some nuts, a sugar mouse, perhaps a small toy. Each stocking was a promise that the morning would bring wonder. And as the house grew quiet, with only the fire's final embers left glowing, the magic of Christmas settled like a blanket over every soul. Parents whispered goodnight behind half-closed doors. Children dreamed of sleigh bells and candlelight. And even the wind outside softened its voice for a while. In these moments, in the hush of the season, the togetherness, the thoughtful gestures, Victorian England found its truest version of Christmas. Not in wealth, but in warmth. Not in noise, but in grace. As snow began to fall gently on rooftops, blanketing chimneys and carriages alike, the world paused. A stillness wrapped the night in soft white folds. Inside, hearts beat slow and full, grateful for family, for kindness, for the quiet beauty of the season. Christmas, in this age, was not fleeting. It lingered in letters and lace, in candlelight and song. It reminded all that in the midst of cold and darkness, light could still be found, within each home, and within each heart. In the heart of Victorian England, amid soot-covered chimneys and fog-draped streets, something remarkable was stirring, a quiet revolution powered not by politics, but by possibility. It was an age of invention. An age of steam and science. An era where dreams, once confined to the realm of imagination, began to take tangible form. The rhythmic chug of trains echoed across the countryside, carving new paths between towns and cities. Railways stretched like veins across the land, bringing with them not just speed, but connection. The clatter of iron wheels, the hiss of steam, and the low call of whistles became part of the lullaby of the age. For those watching from grassy hillsides or station platforms, the locomotive was a marvel. Great engines, black, powerful, alive, pulled carriages of oak and brass. Passengers inside marveled at the speed, once unimaginable, now ordinary. The world was shrinking, and possibilities were expanding. In cluttered workshops and candlelit studies, inventors worked deep into the night. Their tables were scattered with sketches, gears, wires, and the delicate bones of half-built machines. Some failed, many did. But others, the rare, brilliant others, changed everything. One such mind belonged to Charles Babbage, whose dreams hinted at machines that could think in numbers, predict, and compute. He called it the analytical engine, a device far ahead of its time, the ancestor of modern computers, imagined with brass and steam. By his side, the visionary Ada Lovelace wrote of its potential, seeing not just numbers but poetry in its code. Elsewhere, great factories hummed like metal beehives. Their chimneys poured smoke into the gray sky, and inside, looms danced with threads, presses stamped metal, and workers moved to the beat of pistons and gears. These were the workshops of the modern age, places where the Industrial Revolution pulsed with life. Yet, for all their noise and might, invention wasn't always grand. Sometimes, it was found in the simple beauty of a new sewing machine, a more efficient stove, or a safer lamp. Each small advance made home life easier, safer, more comfortable, especially for those who had long lived without luxury. Science, too, was awakening. Men and women peered into microscopes, charted stars, and cracked open ancient stones. In dusty libraries and gleaming laboratories, they sought to understand the world not just through faith or feeling, but through careful observation. The great museums of London opened their doors to the public. There, curious minds could gaze upon dinosaur bones, Egyptian mummies, or the preserved wings of butterflies from distant lands. The world, once vast and mysterious, was becoming knowable. At night, lanterns glowed warmly in study rooms, illuminating pages filled with equations, diagrams, and discoveries. The air was filled with the scent of oil, ink, and ideas. It was a time of wonder, and wonder was everywhere. In the heart of Victorian England, amid soot-covered chimneys and fog-draped streets, something remarkable was stirring, a quiet revolution powered not by politics, but by possibility. It was an age of invention. An age of steam and science. An era where dreams, once confined to the realm of imagination, began to take tangible form. The rhythmic chug of trains echoed across the countryside, carving new paths between towns and cities. Railways stretched like veins across the land, bringing with them not just speed, but connection. The clatter of iron wheels, the hiss of steam, and the low call of whistles became part of the lullaby of the age. For those watching from grassy hillsides or station platforms, the locomotive was a marvel. Great engines, black, powerful, alive, pulled carriages of oak and brass. Passengers inside marveled at the speed, once unimaginable, now ordinary. The world was shrinking, and possibilities were expanding. In cluttered workshops and candlelit studies, inventors worked deep into the night. Their tables were scattered with sketches, gears, wires, and the delicate bones of half-built machines. Some failed, many did. But others, the rare, brilliant others, changed everything. One such mind belonged to Charles Babbage, whose dreams hinted at machines that could think in numbers, predict, and compute. He called it the analytical engine, a device far ahead of its time, the ancestor of modern computers, imagined with brass and steam. By his side, the visionary Ada Lovelace wrote of its potential, seeing not just numbers but poetry in its code. Elsewhere, great factories hummed like metal beehives. Their chimneys poured smoke into the gray sky, and inside, looms danced with threads, presses stamped metal, and workers moved to the beat of pistons and gears. These were the workshops of the modern age, places where the Industrial Revolution pulsed with life. Yet, for all their noise and might, invention wasn't always grand. Sometimes, it was found in the simple beauty of a new sewing machine, a more efficient stove, or a safer lamp. Each small advance made home life easier, safer, more comfortable, especially for those who had long lived without luxury. Science, too, was awakening. Men and women peered into microscopes, charted stars, and cracked open ancient stones. In dusty libraries and gleaming laboratories, they sought to understand the world not just through faith or feeling, but through careful observation. The great museums of London opened their doors to the public. There, curious minds could gaze upon dinosaur bones, Egyptian mummies, or the preserved wings of butterflies from distant lands. The world, once vast and mysterious, was becoming knowable. At night, lanterns glowed warmly in study rooms, illuminating pages filled with equations, diagrams, and discoveries. The air was filled with the scent of oil, ink, and ideas. It was a time of wonder, and wonder was everywhere. In the heart of Victorian England, amid soot-covered chimneys and fog-draped streets, something remarkable was stirring, a quiet revolution powered not by politics, but by possibility. It was an age of invention. An age of steam and science. An era where dreams, once confined to the realm of imagination, began to take tangible form. The rhythmic chug of trains echoed across the countryside, carving new paths between towns and cities. Railways stretched like veins across the land, bringing with them not just speed, but connection. The clatter of iron wheels, the hiss of steam, and the low call of whistles became part of the lullaby of the age. For those watching from grassy hillsides or station platforms, the locomotive was a marvel. Great engines, black, powerful, alive, pulled carriages of oak and brass. Passengers inside marveled at the speed, once unimaginable, now ordinary. The world was shrinking, and possibilities were expanding. In cluttered workshops and candlelit studies, inventors worked deep into the night. Their tables were scattered with sketches, gears, wires, and the delicate bones of half-built machines. Some failed, many did. But others, the rare, brilliant others, changed everything. One such mind belonged to Charles Babbage, whose dreams hinted at machines that could think in numbers, predict, and compute. He called it the analytical engine, a device far ahead of its time, the ancestor of modern computers, imagined with brass and steam. By his side, the visionary Ada Lovelace wrote of its potential, seeing not just numbers but poetry in its code. Elsewhere, great factories hummed like metal beehives. Their chimneys poured smoke into the gray sky, and inside, looms danced with threads, presses stamped metal, and workers moved to the beat of pistons and gears. These were the workshops of the modern age, places where the Industrial Revolution pulsed with life. Yet, for all their noise and might, invention wasn't always grand. Sometimes, it was found in the simple beauty of a new sewing machine, a more efficient stove, or a safer lamp. Each small advance made home life easier, safer, more comfortable, especially for those who had long lived without luxury. Science, too, was awakening. Men and women peered into microscopes, charted stars, and cracked open ancient stones. In dusty libraries and gleaming laboratories, they sought to understand the world not just through faith or feeling, but through careful observation. The great museums of London opened their doors to the public. There, curious minds could gaze upon dinosaur bones, Egyptian mummies, or the preserved wings of butterflies from distant lands. The world, once vast and mysterious, was becoming knowable. At night, lanterns glowed warmly in study rooms, illuminating pages filled with equations, diagrams, and discoveries. The air was filled with the scent of oil, ink, and ideas. It was a time of wonder, and wonder was everywhere. In the heart of Victorian England, amid soot-covered chimneys and fog-draped streets, something remarkable was stirring, a quiet revolution powered not by politics, but by possibility. It was an age of invention. An age of steam and science. An era where dreams, once confined to the realm of imagination, began to take tangible form. The rhythmic chug of trains echoed across the countryside, carving new paths between towns and cities. Railways stretched like veins across the land, bringing with them not just speed, but connection. The clatter of iron wheels, the hiss of steam, and the low call of whistles became part of the lullaby of the age. For those watching from grassy hillsides or station platforms, the locomotive was a marvel. Great engines, black, powerful, alive, pulled carriages of oak and brass. Passengers inside marveled at the speed, once unimaginable, now ordinary. The world was shrinking, and possibilities were expanding. In cluttered workshops and candlelit studies, inventors worked deep into the night. Their tables were scattered with sketches, gears, wires, and the delicate bones of half-built machines. Some failed, many did. But others, the rare, brilliant others, changed everything. One such mind belonged to Charles Babbage, whose dreams hinted at machines that could think in numbers, predict, and compute. He called it the analytical engine, a device far ahead of its time, the ancestor of modern computers, imagined with brass and steam. By his side, the visionary Ada Lovelace wrote of its potential, seeing not just numbers but poetry in its code. Elsewhere, great factories hummed like metal beehives. Their chimneys poured smoke into the gray sky, and inside, looms danced with threads, presses stamped metal, and workers moved to the beat of pistons and gears. These were the workshops of the modern age, places where the Industrial Revolution pulsed with life. Yet, for all their noise and might, invention wasn't always grand. Sometimes, it was found in the simple beauty of a new sewing machine, a more efficient stove, or a safer lamp. Each small advance made home life easier, safer, more comfortable, especially for those who had long lived without luxury. Science, too, was awakening. Men and women peered into microscopes, charted stars, and cracked open ancient stones. In dusty libraries and gleaming laboratories, they sought to understand the world not just through faith or feeling, but through careful observation. The great museums of London opened their doors to the public. There, curious minds could gaze upon dinosaur bones, Egyptian mummies, or the preserved wings of butterflies from distant lands. The world, once vast and mysterious, was becoming knowable. At night, lanterns glowed warmly in study rooms, illuminating pages filled with equations, diagrams, and discoveries. The air was filled with the scent of oil, ink, and ideas. It was a time of wonder, and wonder was everywhere.